My name is Emma Collier. I turned 29 this year, and I live alone in a quiet part of Portland, Oregon. My apartment is small but filled with light. It sits on the second floor of a red brick building that overlooks an alley filled with vines. Mornings here are quiet with the sound of birds and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. I work remotely as a data engineer for a private security firm based in Seattle. It's a job that pays well, demands silence, and fits someone who wants to stay hidden. Most days, I spend my time solving code problems, drinking black coffee, and walking alone near the river when the city is still asleep. But on my 29th birthday, something arrived that dragged me back into a world I had been running from for 3 years. It was a box, a square, cream-colored parcel wrapped with a navy blue ribbon, sitting on my doorstep like a ghost from the past. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. It was addressed by hand. My name, Emma Collier, in the neat cursive I hadn't seen since I left home. Inside the package was a box of chocolates. Luxurious, expensive, handmade. The kind of sweets you'd only get from someone who remembered your exact taste. Nestled on top was a small card. The handwriting was unmistakable. Happy birthday, Em. Hope you're finally ready to forgive. Dad. I remember sitting down on the cold tile floor of my kitchen, holding the box in both hands, my stomach twisting with a kind of dread that felt old and familiar. My father had not contacted me in 3 years. Not after I left home. Not after what happened at Collier Care. Not after I told the truth. And now he wanted forgiveness. The irony was too sharp. I placed the box on the counter and stepped away like it might explode. I hadn't spoken about my family to anyone in Portland. Most people here knew me as the quiet girl who worked in tech and liked her coffee strong. They didn't know that my father, Nathan Collier, was once the head of one of the largest private hospital chains in the Pacific Northwest. They didn't know that I had worked for him or that my departure was not some innocent career change. 3 years ago, I had uncovered something that shattered everything I believed in. I had been managing data integrity at one of our company's regional offices when I noticed something odd in the mortality records. There were patients listed as discharged who had in fact died. When I dug deeper, I found internal memos referencing faulty surgical devices. The devices had been used in over 60 operations. At least 9 patients had died as a result. The memos had been signed off by senior executives. One of them was my father. I remember confronting him in his office that overlooked the sound his desk clean as always, his cufflinks gleaming. Dad, I said I found something. This needs to be fixed. We have to report this. He stared at me for a long time, his face unreadable. Emma, he said, finally. Do you know how many lives this company has saved? I said that didn't matter, that 9 lives lost because of negligence was 9 too many. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. Then he said something I will never forget. There are things you think are evil when you're young, but with time you'll learn that silence keeps institutions alive. And institutions save more lives than individuals. I walked out of his office that day, printed every document I had found, and submitted a full report to the state medical board. I thought I was doing the right thing. The backlash was immediate. My father called me a traitor. My name was quietly removed from company records. Rumors spread that I had fabricated data. My job offer from another firm was rescinded days later, and though no lawsuit was ever filed against me, the message was clear. I was cut off. I moved to Portland, changed my number, took a job where no one asked questions. I buried it all, or tried to, until the box arrived. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my brother. Hey, just checking in. Happy birthday, Em. Oliver wants to say hi. Oliver was my 6-year-old nephew, Josh's son, the only person who still called me Aunt Emma. Tell him I miss him, I replied. Then I paused, glancing at the chocolate box still sitting untouched on my counter. You guys want to come by this weekend? I got some birthday sweets. Would love to see you both. Josh responded almost instantly. He'll be thrilled. Saturday, okay? When Saturday arrived, the weather was mild gray skies but dry. Josh parked his car across the street from my building and helped Oliver climb out. The boy was wearing a bright green hoodie with dinosaurs on it and mismatched sneakers. He ran ahead, waving both arms. Aunt Emma, he shouted when he saw me at the door. I knelt down and scooped him into a hug, his laughter muffled against my shoulder. Josh followed behind, smiling the tired smile I'd grown used to seeing on him, a mix of contentment and quiet resignation. He had always been the one who stayed behind the dutiful son who managed numbers for Dad and kept his head down. We sat in my small kitchen, the three of us bowls of soup warming our hands, while Oliver told me about a papier-mâché volcano he made in school, and Josh filled in the quieter gaps. The conversation moved easily, like nothing had changed, like there weren't years between us, and truths buried beneath layers of silence. After we ate, I brought out the chocolate box. I told Oliver it was a special birthday treat. His eyes lit up. "Is that all for me?" he asked, his voice hopeful. "You get first pick." I smiled, placing the box in front of him. He chose 2 pieces, carefully unwrapping each one and inspecting them like they were treasure. Josh laughed, shook his head, and picked one for himself. I declined. "I was watching my sugar," I said. But the truth was, my stomach clenched every time I looked at that box. They left later that afternoon. Oliver hugged me 3 times before climbing back into the car. Josh thanked me for the lunch and waved as they pulled away. I stood by the window long after they were gone, the street quiet again, the faint smell of chocolate still lingering in my apartment. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Oliver's sticky fingers, his smile as he bit into the chocolate, the way Josh laughed with a tired kind of peace. My father's card echoed in my head. "Hope you're finally ready to forgive." The next morning, just after dawn, my phone rang. It was Kara, Josh's wife. Her voice was shaking. "Emma, something's wrong. Josh and Oliver. They both collapsed this morning. Vomiting. Fever. The doctors are saying it's their livers. They're in the hospital. I don't know what's happening. I need you to come." My mind didn't even register her words in full. I grabbed my coat keys and bag and ran to the car. The drive was a blur. My fingers gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Every red light felt like a punishment. I kept hearing Oliver's voice, his laughter, the rustle of candy wrappers. When I arrived at the hospital, Kara was in the hallway, her face pale, her hands gripping Oliver's green hoodie. "They don't know exactly what it is," she whispered. "But the doctors think it's poisoning. Something attacked their livers. It's bad, Emma. Really bad. Josh is unconscious. Oliver's stable, but they don't know for how long." I sat down in a plastic chair and stared at the floor. My mind was racing, but it kept circling back to one thing. The box, the chocolate, the card. My father. I stood up, walked outside into the parking lot, and pulled out my phone. There was one person I could call, Greg. He and I had met in grad school. He now ran a private toxicology lab. I didn't hesitate. "Greg, it's Emma. I need your help. Urgent. I have a food sample I need tested. I think it's been poisoned. Chocolate. I'll bring it in myself." Greg's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Bring it now. I'll clear the bench." I drove home like a machine. No music, no thoughts. Just the pressure in my chest building with each mile. At my apartment, I put on gloves, carefully packed the remaining chocolates in a freezer bag, and placed them in a hard case with ice packs. I added the note my father wrote. I labeled everything just like I'd done with data samples years ago. Then I drove to Greg's lab on the east side of town. The sky was turning a dusky gray by the time I pulled into the parking lot. Greg met me at the back door. He didn't ask many questions, just took the box and looked me in the eye. "I'll run everything. Mass spec liver toxicity profiles. If something's in there, we'll find it." I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. He disappeared into the lab. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel again, only this time I wasn't driving. I just sat there staring at the cracked windshield, trying to breathe, trying to hold back the image of a little boy in a hospital bed and a brother who might never wake up. 3 days later, Greg called. His voice was tighter than usual. "Emma, you should sit down. I'm looking at the report now. The chocolates were laced with a compound called alpha-amanitin. It's a toxin found in certain mushrooms, extremely lethal. Odorless, tasteless, and very hard to detect. It targets the liver. The dose in these samples, it was enough to kill a healthy adult." My stomach turned cold. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my voice barely a whisper. "You're sure?" "Yes," he said, "and I can have the written report for you by morning." I ended the call and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. The last of the day's light was fading through the blinds. The report confirmed what I already feared. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misstep or a bad batch. Someone had sent poisoned chocolate to my home, and that someone was my father. I stood up, paced the room. My mind raced through the implications. My brother was unconscious. My nephew was clinging to life. And my father, the man who taught me how to ride a bike, who tucked me in with stories of astronauts and moonlight, had sent a weapon disguised as a birthday gift. The truth tasted like metal in my mouth. I knew what I had to do. I opened my old fireproof safe and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in 3 years. It contained copies of the internal memos from Collier Care, the ones that showed he had approved the faulty devices, that he knew what they were doing, that he chose to bury it. I added Greg's toxicology report, scanned everything, encrypted the files, and sent them to a contact I had kept on a secure channel. Her name was Ava Rodriguez, an assistant district attorney I met back when I testified before the medical board. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew she would remember. I sent her a simple message. I have evidence linking a potential poisoning to a cover-up 3 years ago. Victims are in critical condition. I attached the documents, hit send, and stared at the screen as if it could give me answers. An hour later, she replied, "I remember you. I'll call you first thing in the morning." I barely slept that night. I kept replaying it all. The chocolate, the card, the way my father used the word forgive. I thought of Oliver in that tiny hospital bed hooked up to machines, his body too small for this kind of pain. I thought of Josh, the way he smiled at lunch, grateful for the moment. I drove to the hospital early, brought coffee for Kara, and sat beside Oliver's bed for hours. I told him stories about dinosaurs and robots and spaceships, not knowing if he could hear me, but hoping my voice would reach him somewhere. In the afternoon, Ava called. Her tone was calm, but serious. "We're opening a case. The toxicology report is damning. Do you still have the chocolates I did?" I had kept the remaining samples in my freezer. "Good," she said. "We'll need that. Emma, this is going to get messy. You understand that." I know I told her. But I can't let this go. Later that week, law enforcement obtained a search warrant and began tracing the origin of the package. The shipping label was from a boutique chocolate shop in Chicago. Payment was made in cash, but the surveillance footage showed a man picking up the box, someone who had previously worked as an executive assistant to my father. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a thread, one that led back to the Collier family. News didn't break publicly at first, but internally the company was beginning to unravel. Collier Care's legal team launched an internal audit. A few reporters started sniffing around. Ava advised me to stay quiet, stay out of the press. I agreed. I had no interest in being the face of a scandal. I just wanted accountability. Josh remained in a coma. Oliver's condition improved slightly, but the doctors warned of permanent liver damage. Kara rarely left the hospital. I tried to be present to support her, to be strong for someone when I felt like breaking apart. Days blurred together. I stopped counting how many nights I slept in the hospital waiting room. One afternoon, I got a call from my father. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Emma, call me. We need to talk." His voice was calm, measured, as if we were discussing logistics, not attempted murder. That night, I drove back to the old Collier estate. The gate still opened when I keyed in the code. I parked on the driveway and stared at the house for a long time before knocking. My father answered the door himself. He looked thinner than I remembered, his hair more gray, but his eyes, those eyes were the same. Calculating. Cold. We sat in the study, the same room where he once read me bedtime stories. Now we were two strangers playing chess in the dark. "I know why you're here," he said. I didn't respond. "You think I did this, that I tried to hurt you." "Not me," I said quietly. "You hurt Josh. You hurt Oliver." He took a breath. "That wasn't my intention. You always see shadows, Emma. You always think the world is black and white." I leaned forward. "They ate the chocolate, Dad. The chocolate you sent to me." He looked away. "You think I would poison my own grandson? My own son. Do you know how insane that sounds?" I stared at him. "Do you remember what you said when I brought you those memos 3 years ago? You said silence keeps institutions alive. And you were right. You were so desperate to protect your legacy that you turned your family into casualties. This wasn't about business. This was personal. You sent that box to make a point, maybe not to kill, but to threaten. And now Josh is dying. He stood up, walked to the window. I built this company from nothing, Emma. I saved lives. I created something that mattered. You tried to destroy it. I didn't flinch. I exposed the truth. That's what matters. He turned his voice low. You've always been naive. You think justice makes things right. It just breaks what's left. I stood, heart pounding. Then maybe things need to break. I left without looking back. The air outside felt thinner, sharper, as if the world had shifted slightly. Back in Portland, I updated Ava, told her about the confrontation. The next week, federal agents raided the Collier Care headquarters. Files were seized, bank accounts flagged, investigations launched into corporate malpractice and obstruction of justice. It was only the beginning. The story broke wide open within days. News outlets picked up on the federal investigation into Collier Care and headlines spread fast. Whistleblower returns with evidence of cover-up and poisoning linked to health giant. My name wasn't released, but people close to the company would know. The media ran images of the corporate headquarters under lockdown employees escorted out stacks of boxes carried into unmarked vans. My father released a statement denying all allegations, calling it a smear campaign orchestrated by a disgruntled former employee. He didn't name me, but his words were meant for me. Meanwhile, Josh remained in a coma. His liver had failed completely. Kara met with transplant coordinators, but the match was complicated and his vitals were unstable. Oliver was awake but weak. The doctor said his liver was damaged beyond full recovery and he would need lifelong medication, regular tests, and a strict diet. The day I sat beside his hospital bed holding his small hand while he looked up at me with tired eyes, something inside me snapped. I had spent 3 years trying to disappear, trying to forget where I came from, but now I couldn't run. Not when this little boy would grow up with scars from a war he never started. That evening, I got a call from Ava. We have more. Surveillance footage shows the former assistant withdrawing cash 2 days before the chocolate purchase. That same assistant booked a hotel in Portland the night before the package was sent. The bakery confirmed someone dropped off instructions and the note handwritten identical to your father's script. We're building the case. Emma, we're going to need you to testify. I told her I would. I owed it to Josh. I owed it to Oliver. The days leading up to the hearing were heavy. I worked during the day, visited the hospital at night, spent the rest of my time reading depositions, reviewing records, and preparing with Ava's team. My mind rarely rested. When I did sleep, it came in fits. One morning, as I drank my 4th cup of coffee, Kara called. Her voice was broken, her words shaky. Emma, he's gone. Josh passed away last night. His heart gave out. I didn't know what to say. My brother, the one who used to sneak cookies to my room when I had nightmares, the one who tried so hard to keep peace when our family cracked. Gone. Because of a box of chocolates. Because of a message wrapped in poison. The funeral was small, quiet. Kara held Oliver's hand, her eyes hollow, her shoulders trembling under the weight of grief. I delivered a short eulogy, barely able to get through it without choking. I didn't mention the case, didn't mention the cause, just spoke about the boy I grew up with, the man who deserved better. My father didn't come. He was under surveillance, though not yet formally charged. After the funeral, I sat in my car, hands frozen on the steering wheel, and cried for the first time since it all began. Not the quiet tears of frustration, but full, body-shaking grief that took me under. Later that week, Ava called. The grand jury approved indictments. Your father is being charged with corporate fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit attempted murder. We couldn't link him directly to the cake in a provable way. No fingerprints, no recorded orders, but the assistant flipped. He admitted the whole thing was planned, that the cake was intended as a message, a scare, maybe worse. The assistant had been paid under the table and promised immunity if he complied. The court proceedings began 2 months later. I took the stand, testified in front of strangers, lawyers, and journalists who scribbled every word. I told them everything about the documents I found, the confrontation, the exile, the chocolates, the hospital beds, Josh's death. I told them I never wanted to destroy anything. I only wanted the truth. My father sat across from me in a dark suit expression unreadable. He didn't look at me while I spoke, not once. When it was his turn, he denied everything. Said the assistant acted alone, that I was emotionally unstable, that I had a vendetta. But the jury saw through him. The emails, the money trail, the memo history, and finally the toxicology report. It painted a picture too clear to ignore. After weeks of testimony, the verdict came. Guilty. On multiple counts. The sentencing hearing followed. 12 years for corporate fraud. 5 more for obstruction. 3 for conspiracy. A total of 20 years in federal prison. My father, the man who once built hospitals, now sentenced to live behind bars. I didn't attend the final day of court. I had already heard everything I needed. Instead, I took a bus out of the city to the edge of the coast, to a small town where the waves hit the rocks with relentless rhythm. I rented a quiet apartment above a bookstore, started working remotely again, writing code during the day, walking by the water at dusk. I stayed in touch with Kara and Oliver. Sent money, visited when I could. He's growing, she said. He asks about you. I kept a photo of Josh and Oliver on my desk. A frozen moment from years ago, the two of them fishing by a lake, sun on their faces, joy unfiltered. I looked at that picture every morning, not out of guilt, but to remember what mattered. Truth had cost me my family, but silence would have cost me my soul. I never expected peace to come all at once. Healing, I learned, is not a finish line. It is a quiet series of choices made every morning when you get out of bed and choose not to drown in memory. In the weeks after the trial, the media moved on. New scandals replaced old ones. Collier Care filed for bankruptcy. The company name disappeared from the skyline, replaced by some new brand promising trust and innovation. I read the headlines in silence. My father's name faded from the news, but it never faded from me. Somewhere in a federal prison, he lives out his days surrounded by concrete and regrets he'll never speak aloud. I don't write to him. I don't answer the few letters he sent. Not out of hatred, but because I have nothing left to say. Kara and Oliver eventually moved to Colorado, closer to her sister. She called, sometimes sent pictures of Oliver smiling at school, holding a soccer ball, standing with his classmates. He's okay, she said. He's strong. I think he gets that from Josh. I listened, my chest tightening every time I heard his voice on the phone. Aunt Emma, when are you visiting again? Soon, I would say. I promise, and I meant it. But I was also learning how to breathe again, how to wake up in the morning and not feel like the past was pressing on my chest. I started keeping a journal. Nothing formal, just thoughts, observations, pages where I tried to understand the cracks in people and systems in love. One night, I wrote a letter to Oliver Mint for when he turns 18. I told him the truth, not just the facts, but the feelings. The guilt, the grief, the fire that led me to speak up when it would have been easier to stay silent. I told him that what happened was never his fault, that he was never meant to carry the consequences of someone else's war. I told him that courage is not about never being afraid. It is about being afraid and choosing to act anyway. I signed the letter and sealed it in an envelope with his name. I keep it in a drawer beside my bed. Sometimes I walk down to the beach at sunrise. The waves crash with rhythm, pulling the sky closer to the earth. I watch them in silence. I think of my mother who passed before all of this. I think of Josh, who never stopped believing in family. I think of the little girl I used to be sitting in her father's lap, not knowing how complicated love could become. And I think of who I am now. A woman who lost a brother, who found the truth, who chose to speak. I still believe in justice, but I no longer believe it fixes everything. It can't undo a death. It can't heal a child's liver. It can't repair the ruins of trust, but it can clear a path. It can make room for new stories. As I sit here typing these words, I feel the weight of them settle not on my shoulders, but beside me, like something I no longer need to carry alone. The past shaped me, but it no longer owns me. I am Emma Collier. I am not my father's sins. I am the woman who survived them,